the locals swarm down the cliff. Those are old shipwrecks. This is the best beach in Cornwall. Hello, it's John from Cornwall Coastal Walks here. It's a lovely spring day and I'm going to walk the Bedruthan Steps, which is an iconic Cornish landmark. You see it on every picture postcard of Cornwall. I'm starting here in the National Trust car park at Park Head, which is just up the coast from the Bedruthan Steps. I'm going to do a 4-mile walk encompassing the steps, a lovely little cove called Porth Mear, and Park Head as well, which is a lovely viewpoint from which you can see both up and down the North Cornish coast. I'm looking forward to it. So we'll be starting here at the car park. We walk down to Porth Mear, out to the Park Head, along to the Bedruthan Steps, and back again. About 3 or 4 miles. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's an extraordinary amount of bird life. Everything's cheeping. It's that time of year, it's late April. But I heard a skylark a moment ago, and there's various warblers and birds I don't know the name of actually, but it's a nice sound. Have a listen. You're never far from the sea in Cornwall, and this is the first sight of it on this particular walk. That's Porth Mear down there. I actually grew up here. I grew up in the village of Morgan Porth, which is about 4 miles down the coast. And some of my earliest memories are coming here with my father actually, and walking down to this hidden little beach. So every footstep is sort of evocative of childhood, really. It's still a wonderful place, and even in my 60s, I love coming here. It's quiet even in the summer. Not many people know about it. We're just approaching the steep-sided valley that leads down to Porth Mear itself. It's the type of geological formation that is known in eastern Cornwall and parts of Devon as a coombe, a little steep-sided coastal valley. I have memories of coming down here when I was a youngster with my mates. When the pub closed up, we'd come down here sometimes for a beach barbecue, and we'd always gather wood in the coombe on the way down. There's always something you could pick up and make a little fire with. Yeah. Lovely display of spring flowers. May blossom. Very characteristic of Cornwall this time of year. Random boat sculpture. This is all National Justice land, and this thing appeared here a few years ago. No idea what it's for, but it looks rather nice. Let's see some reed beds here. You tend to get these in the coastal valleys in Cornwall, or rather I should say you did. When I was a lad in Morgan Porth, the whole of the bottom of the valley, which is flat bottomed, was covered in reed beds, and they're gradually filled in by various farmers in the 1980s. And the fields now and look quite nice, but you can't help thinking there's a habitat's been lost. And these beds still survive in odd little corners of Cornwall, like here. We're just approaching Porth Mear itself. The tide's in, so we can't get very far onto the beach, but we'll go down and have a look. It's still a nice little beach. And here we are on Porth Mear Beach. Like I said, it's a lovely little place. It's often very, very quiet as well, because it's difficult to get to, but it reminds me of beaches you sometimes find in Hebrides in Scotland, actually. It's a very special little place. It's not a bucket and spade beach, as you can probably see. It's quite a pebbly, sort of shingly sort of place. So it's not ideal for young children, but plenty of families do come here and muck about. There's no lifeguard service here, obviously, and as you can see, it's an interesting place to bathe. The tide goes out more or less to the mouth of the bay there, but it's quite rocky on either side. But in terms of just somewhere to sit for the day, read a book, enjoy the peace and quiet and the beauty of the Cornish landscape, it can't be beat. You can probably see on the distant horizon behind me there's some rocks sticking up out of the sea a couple of miles out. I believe those are called the Keys. There's quite a collection of bits of seabed sticking up out of the sea on this stretch of coast, and because it was quite a busy shipping lane, it's heading up to the Bristol Channel in the distance. This was a very, very notorious coast for shipwrecks going back to the 19th and into the 18th centuries, and it's obstacles like that were the fear of mariners of yore, particularly when you're coming up into the approaches to Bristol Channel. If you get the wind swings around to the west or in the northwest, it'll push a sailing boat onto this coast and onto obstructions like that. Absolutely horrible. When we go a bit further up towards Bedruthan Steps, you'll see again the famous steps, the rocks. There's at least one ship lying underneath those rocks. When I was young, you could occasionally see timbers coming up out of the sand, which would sometimes be exposed after a high tide, and those are old shipwrecks. There's quite a number of famous wrecks along this bit of coast. Big stand of three-cornered leeks here, the white flowers, mixed in with bluebells. Nice smell. Obviously they're a species of wild garlic, so quite pungent. So here we are on the headland overlooking Porth Mear. It's a lovely shot of the Cornish coast. The headland in the distance is Trevose Head, and the lighthouse on it is the Trevose Light. Very welcome sight for mariners if they were in danger of being driven onto this coast, because it means you're within striking range of the Camel Estuary and the safety of Padstow Harbour. If you're coming up the coast and you see it on your left hand side, you've got troubles. Close, but not too close to the cliff tops. I actually have quite a severe fear of heights. It's an unusual thing to have if you like walking the Cornish coast, because we've got some beauties, but I sort of stay away from the edge of the cliff. You have to be careful on cliffs like this, because what you think is a path might just go to the cliff's edge. People tend to sort of go and look over, and then there's the path there, and other people follow. Oh, there's an edge and so on. Suddenly you think there's a cliff path, and you carry on along it, and you have a nasty experience at the best. But having said which, the coast path itself, if you follow it, is usually quite well defined. It's where 99% of people walk. So if you're given a choice between two paths, and I've just diverged off the coast path here, but I know the strip well, onto a lesser path. If you're given a choice of two, always choose the better trodden of the two. In most of its National Trust these days as well, and they're very good with their signage. So. But I've got a funny story of my fear of heights, acrophobia I think it's called. Some years ago I walked the Annapurna circuit, which is in the Himalaya in Nepal, and there's one stretch of it which went higher and higher, and it was on a sort of rough-hewn mountain road, but it was a part of the circuit that was cutting through the spine of the Himalayas, and the cliffs above and below the path were sheer, and I've no idea of height, but it felt like it was a mile straight down. Let's call it a mile, because there was quite a substantial river at the bottom, the Gandhi River I think it's called, and this was like a trickle in the distance, you know. I got to the point where I just couldn't go any further, and I thought, this is terrible. I have to turn around and go back to Kathmandu, basically. And at that very moment, I heard music in the distance, and it's a Buddhist chant, Om Mani Padme Hum, which often people in the mountains, because they're mostly Buddhists, they play as a sort of a relaxer as they go along. And I heard this Buddhist chanting coming up the road towards me, and I thought, oh, something's happening. I might be about to be saved. Anyway, round the corner came an ancient sort of Jeep, sort of Land Rover thing, with a party of Tibetans in it. And they were obviously farmers, because the thing was loaded up with hay bales and bits and pieces of farm equipment, that sort of thing. And it lumbered up towards me, and I thought, I'm going to get a lift with these guys. How do you flag down a Jeep load of Tibetans? Well, I used what to me then was the most sensible way of doing it. I stepped out into the road, brandishing a 1,000 rupee note, which was something less than a fiver in our money. But in those regions, that was 2 days' wages. Anyway, the guy driving the Jeep screeched to a halt, like that. And they said, what do you want? I said, can you give me a lift? Sure. We'll take the money, thank you. And the thing is, the next problem was that there wasn't anywhere for me to sit, because this vehicle was absolutely loaded up. Anyway, poor Granny was sitting in the front seat, because they'd obviously decided that the paying guest should have the decent seat, the one with a good view. I didn't want the good view, but I had a good view. They stuffed her in the back, and I was trying to explain, at which point their English failed me, and my Nepalese isn't very good. So anyway, poor Granny ended up in the back for the rest of the journey. They stuck me in the front seat, and we carried on. And I did it the rest of the journey with my eyes shut, because I couldn't stand seeing what I was seeing, even though I was in a car. But I thought, I'm in the protection of someone, and they played this damn music all the way. I had it in my head for days. Oh, money, buddy, And we arrived at the next town. We all bid goodbye. I found a bar, got drunk. That's my fear of heights story. But after then, I didn't have any fear of heights for a couple of years. I think it was the conditioning had been so extreme that it had sort of burned it all out of me on that trip. But there we go. How to cure acrophobia the hard way. Anyway, we've got a bit further to go, so let's press on.
Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum.
So here we are, out on Park Head. The headland actually goes a little bit further out that way, and there is a path. I'm not going to walk out there because I've got fear of heights, but it's a nice spot to just sit and stand and look at the walk. In this direction, behind me, we've just come from Porth Mear, which is just beyond that sticking out bit of headland. The headland you can see beyond is Trevose Head, with Trevose Head Lighthouse on it. And if I walk round in this direction, we're now looking across Newquay Bay, and in the distance is the town of Newquay, heaving with people, even at this time of year. Up here, beautiful, isn't it? And Newquay Bay encompasses Porth, Watergate Bay, Morgan Porth, and the Bedruthan Steps here, for sort of coming out, and it kind of continues a bit in that direction. Officially, Trevose Head is the end of it, and you can just see the steps coming into view here of Bedruthan Steps, and the steps are rocky islands. We'll see them as we get a bit closer up, but the iconic view of Bedruthan Steps is not from this end; it's from the other end. In case you're wondering why you don't recognise it, but we'll be up that way in a bit.
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum, Om 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 Mani Padme
Good morning.
Om Mani Padme 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 Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Mani Padme Om Mani Padme.
So we're just entering the Bedruthan Steps now, or as the National Trust decided to rename it a few years ago, Cornish. It's a little unclear as to why they did that, because it's for hundreds of years, and on photographs and postcards of Cornwall it's always been Bedruthan Steps, and as far as most people are concerned it always will be, but Cornish on the signpost when you're looking for it. Anyway, off we go. Very popular place. This chap ahead of me there, he just stopped me and said, "Did I know anything about birds?" I said, "I'm sorry, I don't." He said, "Oh, I saw you with a camera, I do apologise." He'd seen something with a golden, reddish golden chest. He said he didn't know. I said, "Well, that makes two of us." There are some unusual birds on these Cornish cliff tops. The most iconic of all is the Cornish chough, that in my childhood was extinct, and only in the last 10 years they've been reintroduced to Cornwall from Brittany, I believe. And I'm now starting to see them in quite a few places. It's the national bird of Cornwall. It's on the Cornish flag, or Cornish coat of arms, should I say. And it's only lives on cliff tops. Grubs around in the grass, I believe, for bugs that maybe only live on cliff tops, not quite sure. But the chough has got a characteristic cry. It looks like a small crow from a distance, but it's got a bright orange beak, and it doesn't caw. It's quite musical. I've seen them up as far as Crantock, just south of Newquay, because the original breeding pair were near Land's End, and they're gradually working their way up the coast. But this is ideal countryside for them, so they'll probably be up here sooner or later. Bit of coastal erosion here has happened since my youth, actually, because the path, the cliff path, the coast path, used to run on the seaward side of this hedge. As you can see, there's not a lot of cliff left now, and unfortunately it's been rerouted on a much nicer side. So, the gate here. These bushes here, trees they are, tamarisk, which is a Mediterranean tree, I believe, and very much planted along this stretch of coast, because if I scan around, you probably see there's not a lot of trees up here. It's a very, very wind-blasted landscape, and these are the only things that'll put up with the teeth of a salt-laden Atlantic gale. And they don't grow to their full size. I mean, you see tamarisks in the Med, and they're full-size trees. But they're planted, as here, along the tops of hedge. I remember in my youth we had them all over Morgan Porth, as a shelter break, basically. It's the only sort you can establish up here. Flowers, sea pinks, look at those. Again, sea pinks, you see these all on the cliff top. I mean, they survive in hostile conditions. You see them a lot on the Cornish coast. Another place you see them, strangely enough, or certainly a very close relative. Some years ago I was walking in Iceland, which is a volcanic landscape, and it looks like a council car park. It's mainly ash all over the place. And I saw these things growing in the middle of all these ash fields, and I thought, well, they're tough, aren't they? More coastal erosion. The path, as earlier, the path sometimes has to be moved back, and there's a continual purchasing of little strips of land, I think, from farmers by the National Trust. They move the path back into a safer region. Wonderful beach down there. Unfortunately, you can't access it at the moment. Some fairly rickety steps that have collapsed, and there's big warning signs saying don't go down there. A few people scramble past them, but it's a beach that is cut into lots of little beaches by the rising tide. And there's an incident some years ago when the Coast Guard were called out to rescue a family that was cut off, and he turned up. A cluster of concerned people at the top of the cliff, and he said, oh, just a minute, I'll go and see if they're all right. He went down the steps, access steps, popped through a tunnel in the cliff, a natural tunnel that communicated between one of these little bays. Went to see the people, said, are you all right? I said, yeah, we're all right. Came back up, addressed the waiting crowd, said, yeah, they're all right. Went home again. It's a funny place. I said people do go down there. I was walking up here about a year ago, not that long ago, and this bit where we are at the moment, you'd think it's horrendous cliffs. Suddenly a head appeared over the top of the cliff, followed by a very large surfboard, followed by his mate. It's two young men. They'd gone down the cliffs. I said, how did you do that? He said, well, you can't see it from up here, but there's a path. Oh. I looked and I looked and I looked. I looked from the other side. You could just about see a path, but rather them than me.
Yeah, I just didn't ask her about tonight because...
Morning. Yep. It's the steps of Bedruthan Steps, called Cornish. Just coming into view there. It's the top of them, where they were. For visitors to Bedruthan Steps who don't want to come in the long way, there's actually a car park at the top of the cliff up there, and a cafe actually as well, and toilets. And lots of people. It's the downside. Morning. Yeah. A shot of the beach there. Yeah. The beach that very few people can get to. This is the iconic picture postcard view that anywhere in the world you show people that, they say, ah, Cornwall. And there's the famous steps of Bedruthan Steps that allegedly were carved by the giant Bedruthan, who was so fed up of having to divert inland when he was going to visit his mate. He pulled up bits of land and threw them as stepping stones across the bay so he could step from one to the other and not get his feet wet. So a little rock, a little pointy thing in the middle distance there was known as Queen Bess Rock. Unfortunately, I think about 80 years ago, it lost its head because it was an icon, good old Queen Bess. But the head dropped off and now it's just a pointy thing. There's still a bit of coast, may look beautiful now, but this was a bad place. If you were coming up this coast, and we're at the approach to the Bristol Channel here, in the days of sailing ships, because if the wind turned around to the west or the northwest, you'd be driven onto this coast. There's two places you can ditch in. There's Newquay Harbour, which is not an easy approach if you're being driven in this direction, because you've got to swing around the headland and back in. Or if you can get round Trevose Head, which we saw earlier in the walk, you can get into the Camel Estuary and you've got shelter there and ultimately Padstow Harbour. But here you've got nothing. And if the wind drives you onto this coast, you can't even get up the cliffs safely. And there have been some very, very bad shipwrecks along this coast. There's one famous one, and one of the islands here is called Samaritan Rock, which is the wreck of the Samaritan. And it was in the 1840s. It was a notorious time for the Cornish. It was a colder climate than we have now. It's not very good farming around here. And in the winter time, forget fishing. So people were starving, basically. And suddenly the Samaritan arrived, and it was a boat from the West Indies on its way to, I can't remember whether it was Liverpool or Bristol now, but it was bringing all sorts of unimaginable luxuries, for the Cornish anyway, to the people up in England. And it was driven onto the beach here in the middle of a horrendous storm. Some of the people died. I think a few were rescued. But when the storm had gone, the locals swarmed down the cliff in large numbers to gather the cargo, and it was an unbelievable sight. There were calicos and silks. There was beef, salt beef in large quantities. And all sorts of knickknacks, spices and things like that. And it became immortalised as the Good Samaritan, because it came to, it saved people, basically. And there was a poem written called The Good Samaritan. It goes, in 1844, the Good Samaritan came ashore to feed the hungry and clothe the poor. With boxes of beef and bales of linen, now no poor folk shall want for a shilling. And there was an old boy lived just north of me, where I lived at Morgan Porth, and he had a set of candlesticks in his living room which were taken from the captain's cabin of the Samaritan all those years ago and handed on as a little heirloom. And here's the access to the steps that I've been down many times in my youth, and unfortunately no more. So this is as far as you can go. This barrier stops you going down the famous steps, and it is sad. This is the best beach in Cornwall. Certainly the prettiest. I mean, I know Kynance Cove down way down west is Instagrammed a lot, and people go there and then go ooh and so on. But it's a tiny little place, Whereas this is a beach you can really spread out on, and there's lots of little rock pools. Like I said, there's little mini bays that go all the way along, so children can have an amazing time here. Hopefully they'll open it up again. It's just a matter of getting the boys in with a bit of dynamite and you know, sorting it out again. But this sign's been up for a while. I don't know when that day will come. This plaque's been here since my youth. Alex C. Laurie of Derby, I think it says, who was drowned in this bay August the 2nd, 1903. It goes on to say, this plaque was put here by his friends to serve as a warning to all visitors of the dangers of bathing from these sands. Very sad. This is the path that carries on. It goes up to the gift shop and the toilets and the car park and so on. And of course it carries on. This is the coast path. So it eventually goes to, I think, Poole in Dorset that way. But anyway, we're heading back now, and we retraced our steps along the cliff top, and then at the appropriate point we'll ditch in back to the car park. Lovely colour gorses. Iconic of Cornwall. Again, it's another of those things that grows everywhere. But I believe gorse, or furze as it's known in Cornish, was the main fuel for poor people back along in this stretch of coast. Gathering furs for the fire. Something you occasionally read of. You'd have to be pretty desperate though. I mean, it's got these little stick-like branches, which I suppose you could burn if you're desperate. You'd have to be. Anyway, it's pretty. Little shot there, Queen Bess Rock, closest approach. There we are. She must have looked quite grand in her day. Don't know where the head is, be lying around somewhere. And here's the diversion off the cliff path, which goes back to the car park. There we go. Pentire Farm car park, 1/3 of a mile. I think we can manage that.